Welcome to another... Don't talk on the other end there. Welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. This will be aired on December 30th, 2005. That'll be the last one for this year. We have with us today, once again, some guests that are very familiar to everybody who listens to the Grassy Knoll, and Michael Corbin and other people, I'm sure, and that is Philip and Paul Collins. There are two authors who together have collaborated on The Hidden Face of Terrorism. That's a short title. And I always try to do this thing right. I never seem to, but I'll just give you the short title for the other book, and that's The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. And since I did so well, I'll give you the subtitle, Examination of Epistemic Autocracy from the 19th to the 21st Century. I done good, didn't I?
No, it sounds good.
All right, thank you very much. All right, and so we have the Collins brothers back with us. The last time they were on, we had a very spirited conversation, and we're going to touch on some other subjects that they've not spoken to. And some that we have, but they're going to embellish. Let me ask you first of all. I get the gist that we're looking at an expansion of which particular title?
We're looking at an expansion of the Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. We're currently going back in and basically augmenting some of the old material with new material, revising old material. Doing a little bit of reconfiguring of the text so that it's a little bit more coherent and so that people can follow the ideational continuum throughout the book, because there's a thematic thread there that's very important for people to pick up on.
We're also making some corrections in some of our past estimations given new information that's come in, namely the analysis that was done over peak oil in the book. We're now totally, almost 100% in the opposite direction of what we used to believe concerning that. A lot of information has come out since we started writing over that topic, and so we just want to look at it from the perspective, from a new perspective, given the new data that has emerged.
At the time that we were writing it, I was not familiar with abiotic oil generation. I was not familiar with Colin Campbell's complete record, and now since that information's come to light, we want to really examine that debate more clearly and put things into proper perspective.
I also think that when you have a quasi kind of populist view, like in particular I do and Phil does to some extent, the idea of the big oil guys being out on the streets panhandling and officially out of business has a romantic kind of tinge to it. But when you look at peak oil and the agenda and the pretext that it creates for all these different horrible eugenical kind of plans that the elite have, then all of a sudden you kind of change your mind.
Listen, no one's holding your feet to the fire for saying, let me amend my belief. And I'll tell you, I wasn't thinking too much about it either way, though I always have a tendency to doubt anything that's being told to me in the mainstream about oil, having lived through the bad old 70s when we knew we got scammed back then. But what got me extremely concerned is when Rupert, who I had listened to, for whatever work he did on 9/11, all of a sudden started going with the peak oil thing. I'm like, all right. And then when you tie it into depopulation, I mean, then the bells and whistles go off and the alarms, and I'm saying, all right, we've got a stinker here. So, I mean, I can understand, and I appreciate the fact that you might do a rethink. That's fine. I also think it's kind of interesting, and I might be wrong because I don't pay any attention to him anymore. But I don't know if Rupert's been marginalized. I don't know where he's gone to. I'm glad he's disappeared, but...
It's interesting that you say that, actually, Viz, because I remember him being on The Wrench Show. I remember him being on The Alex Jones Show. I remember when Stanley Monteith would have him on. Lou Epton couldn't get enough of him, loved having him on his show. And then all of a sudden, as his work began to take more and more of this peak oil trajectory, he started to really disappear. And I love some of his older work because he just basically takes the tact of a homicide detective or just a police detective in general, or a prosecutor presenting a case before a jury, he was really able, taking that tact, to really, pin down the case for the Central Intelligence Agency being involved in the drug trade. But when he got off into this peak oil thing, all of a sudden he became kind of fanatical in my estimation, and it's interesting, all of a sudden all the problems of the world, all the ills of the world went back to peak oil for him. It was almost as if he was ready to say that dandruff and bad skin had something to do with diminishing hydrocarbon energy.
Without a doubt. In fact, the day he was on Rents, and he started with that, Rents was taken aback some, and I, sitting at my desk doing something else with that as background noise, all of a sudden stopped what I was doing, and I popped my head up, and I could hear Rents going, "Oh, all right." Not knowing, not knowing where this was going, and that was the beginning of Rupert's peak oil depopulation. We got entropy. Let's all die.
Well, with Michael Rupert, I tremendously respect the man's research in terms of drug trafficking and elite criminality. I think with him, it's just a matter of somebody who allowed their ideology to get the best of them. But, you find that in this field all the time. You find folks who allow their left-wing or their right-wing proclivities to dominate their findings, and as a result, all of a sudden what was initially viable information is tainted. And that seems to be the case with Rupert. And
it could also be just a case of good old-fashioned pride, where the man took that belief and took that contention, and now that information contrary to that belief is coming out, he doesn't want to look stupid, and so he's going to stick to his guns, even if the information is, overwhelmingly overturning what he believed. With us, it's a matter of being scholarly and being straight. At the time when we started, we didn't ever hear anything about this Professor Thomas Gold, who's an astrophysicist at Cornell University, who was basically saying that oil comes from methane and heat-loving bacteria that's in the biosphere. Beneath the surface of the Earth, and we had never even heard of this guy, and supposedly he's a very reputable scientist, and he achieved some fame with his paper, The Deep Hot Biosphere, which came out of the National Academy of Sciences, and so when you hear about reputable sources like that coming out with compelling evidence to suggest that you were wrong, then we have enough humility to say, well, this is what we reported, but this is what we reported then, but now it's a different story. It's the same thing that with William Cooper. For him, he was quite convinced at one time that there was an extraterrestrial threat, and then later on, evidence began to emerge that suggested that the whole UFO phenomena was basically some kind of government psyop, and he had to admit it, and he had the guts to admit it later on that he was in all likelihood wrong. And I just don't know if I think that pride might be getting in the way of Rupert, going in that direction and saying, well, it might not be the case with peak oil.
Well, you guys left out one very heavy motivator in all the scenarios you laid out with Rupert, and don't forget money.
Yeah.
I'm serious. What I think, and I'm not going to tell you what I think. I'm going to ask you: do you not think that there is a mainstreaming going on right now in Patriot and alternative news?
It is very interesting that you bring that up. That ties in right with what we were talking about last time in the last interview with you, Viz. For instance, Jim Gilchrist, who is the head of the Minutemen, he's being mainstreamed. Most people don't know this, but his campaign, his congressional campaign, is being ran by Mary Parker Lewis and Connie Hare from the Diener Group, which is a neoconservative group. And Connie Hare is an 8-year veteran of PSYOPs, it's believed, and Lewis was an associate of Irving Kristol's son, Bill Kristol, and worked for him. And so you see this attempt to get Gilchrist off on a neoconservative trajectory. Another individual in the Patriot movement that's done some excellent work over Area 51, Norio Hayakawa, who has basically put forward circumstantial but still compelling evidence to suggest that that technology developed and tested at Area 51 might be used to create some kind of fake extraterrestrial threat. He's gone neoconservative, and he's quite open about it. If you go to his site now on the web, he has an article up there saying why I am a neoconservative, and he goes right on down the list and gives the bulletin list of the reasons why he has chosen to back the neoconservative force. There's a big push to take these people that have done some good work and to turn them around. And unfortunately, when the neoconservatives in particular turn up the charm, we have people in the Patriot community that get starry-eyed, and if we're going to be honest with ourselves and be able to be effective, then we have to face up to that.
Yeah, and basically the only solution that I see is just remaining grassroots. You're going to have to network with people that you've known the majority of your life, people that you trust, people that you can basically share confidential information with. And the problem is that when you start to really develop some notoriety and you start to develop a certain degree of fame, people are taking interest. I mean, I noticed not too long ago, David Icke was on was it the History Channel that he was on?
Yes, it was the History Channel.
Yeah, and I mean, the crazier the stuff that Icke throws out there, the more and more people are going to read it, and more people are going to buy into it. And that's one of the reasons why I think he peddles around the interdimensional reptilian theories, and also the malarkey about Jesus having never been born, which is peddled by Archariah S. and other folks, and which is historically been debunked. But the money motive is very much there. I mean, the more that you write that stuff, the more a lot of folks want to read that.
The more sensational, the more you're going to sell. The more yellow journalism you put forward, the more dollars you're going to rake in. And so it's just more. If it's money you're interested in, it's more in your interest to write about purple people eaters from Mars taking over our precious bodily fluids than it is to talk about real facts concerning the world political dynamic and elite criminality and political conspiracy.
Well, a couple interesting things. One with regard to that statement about precious bodily fluids. We played a soundbite from Dr. Strangelove during our Christmas show. But what people don't realize, and you guys have seen the movie I'm taking it, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, did you realize, as many people don't, that in that famous exchange between Sterling Hayden and Peter Sellers, one is Jack Ripper and the other is Mandrake?
Right.
That whole thing is tied into fluoride.
Oh, yeah. You
remember that?
Yeah. In fact, they play it off as a red baiting conspiracy theory. That they play it off as an anti-communist conspiracy theory that communists are attempting to use fluoride to pollute us and what have you. And then they kind of tried to at one point tie it into, I guess, male shortcomings. Ripper says that in order to keep his fluids from being polluted when he's with a woman in an intimate fashion, he retains those fluids and doesn't share them with
That's
her.
right. Well, yeah. He goes, Mandrake, do you ever wonder why the Russians drink vodka? So anyway, and actually fluoride, we agree, is definitely a dumbing down solution.
Yeah. It's also interesting in that film. Also, I mean, that's another case of ideological propensities really contaminating one's worldview, because the film makes some excellent points regarding, Nazis and Nazi sympathizers being imported here to the United States, and it even makes a reference, if I'm not mistaken, to the Rand Corporation. But and while this is all worthwhile, this is all worthwhile facts and data, it ignores the I guess you would call it the left-wing side of the conspiracy, if there is indeed a left and a right. But again, that would suit somebody with the political orientation of Kubrick, who sees all the boogeymen on the right and none on the left.
Well, let's not forget the fact that I think you would agree, as John Valentini had said, that the waivers of the wood of the holly, those in filmmakers and in TV, many of them are pretty plugged into what's going on, and they can use it as supposed fiction storylines and have a nice little wink in an elbow in the ribs.
That's true, but there's also some people in the entertainment arena that are working to make a positive change, that know what's going on. For instance, J. Michael Straczynski with his series Babylon 5, that man really knew and understood elite criminality a lot more than he was willing to say out loud. So he couched it in his science fiction, and people should really go back and check out that series and see in particular the characters of the shadows that he had in there, and see and look at what these manipulating individuals were doing and who they were an allegory for.
Yeah, but staying on the trajectory of filmmaking and entertainment as a form of propaganda, and even in some sense semiotic warfare. There are filmmakers, there are many science fiction writers who have been tied to or have been exposed to the criminal elite's philosophy, to their belief systems. For instance, H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was a member of the Coefficients Club, and the Coefficients Club was one of the elite machinations in Great Britain. Its members were preoccupied with warfare. In fact, one of its former members, none other than atheistic philosopher Bertrand Russell, quit because he didn't like all the talk of war. It didn't mesh well with his pacifist philosophy.
Right.
But it's interesting because later on, you would have World War II taking place, and World War II unfolds in many ways very closely with a work of H.G. Wells, a so-called fictional work called The Shape of Things to Come.
Right.
In The Shape of Things to Come, H.G. Wells places the beginning of the war and the end of the war. Now, he's not entirely 100% accurate, but he places the beginning and ending dates very close to when the war begins and ends. He also cites a border, some sort of border disturbance as being one of the chief causes of the war, and lo and behold, such border disturbances were what incited Nazi Germany's part of their
invasion.
Yeah, part of their drive. He also cites the city of London as kind of like the economic control center of the world, which is pretty much straight on, dead on. And a great many of his so-called prophecies come to pass in that book, and it leads one to believe that, given his membership in Coefficients Club, there's also certain sources allege that he was a Freemason, and his exposure to the circles of the power elite, the shape of things to come was possibly some of his best guesses as to the means and the timetable by which world government would be established.
I hope you're putting the term "best guesses" in quotation marks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because again, many of his dates are a little bit off, but only a little bit. They're vague. They're approximations, and it's very impressive the precision with which he sets the timetable.
Two things we want to talk about, and I want to get to in this hour. The Perpetual War series and how it plays in, at least in my mind, to Neo-Cons and Trotsky. But I would like to talk about, I think we're touching upon a little bit of shall we say, predictive programming. Would that be accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, the reason being is that, again, as you pointed about Babylon 5, and I never looked at that series as in a, shall we say, a white perspective, as opposed to what else goes on in Hollywood as the black perspective. You know what I mean? It's good and bad or whatever. Mm-hmm. But with predictive programming, and we had a gentleman on who will probably be heard after you folks, this is in the works, a guy by the name of Alan Watt out of Ontario, Canada. But what a surprise, I have Canadian guests on. And he was talking about the same thing that's going on today, and a lot of the things that he talks about, unbeknownst to him or to you, hit on some of the same things you talk about. So what I find interesting is, without you two knowing him or he is necessarily knowing your work, you're resonating along the same continuum about what's been going on this globe from, time immemorial. And, this whole bit about an economic system that was being pursued, and you guys take it back through, the Canaanites, and if I'm hitting the high points correctly, through the Venetian nobility and such. He's following the same tracks. And if you get a chance, I hope you can listen to what he has to say. I find it very heartening that you two have both hit the same stuff without knowing it, and that's usually a good indication that that's good information.
Oh yeah.
All right, I just want to run some things by you because, sometimes I guess there's some science behind this, but like when you're like half paying attention, sometimes some cliches, some idioms, some wordsmithing hits you, and it's like, what was that about? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like with Lady Viz and I getting ready to go to work in the morning, we pass by NBC with Katie and Matt, and sometimes things just jump out, and we'll stop doing what we're doing going, what was that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's better than if we were sitting down and really listening, because we probably would fall into like some kind of beta state and just like drool.
Yeah, basically the passive viewer and just allowing these phrases to just kind of fly by as you take in these visceral images.
All right, now talking about psychological ops and mind manipulation of the masses as it happens at the end of every year, I just want to run this by you. Did you hear anything to the effect lately that all the indicators look good because oil prices fell and people have more money to spend? Did you hear that little connection at all lately?
I heard that especially on the Fox News network, which is always eager to make this administration look good.
But
I mean, like they were talking about probably a day to 2 days ago on the Fox News network about how the economy couldn't be that bad because there's a lot of buying going on now, and the people are out in the stores. And they're hitting the retail circuit and starting to buy for Christmas, and I heard a lot about that in the last day and a half to 2 days.
Yeah, and the thing is, now here's what people should do. This is what we do. We're not brainiacs. I got the IQ of a small electronic appliance. But the thing is, I listen to them say, okay, oil prices went down, which we're supposed to translate to saying, okay, gas prices are cheaper, and therefore I have more money in my pocket to go out and spend money, which the handlers want us to do. And I'm like, what? How much am I saving at the pump? $1? Or $10 a week. That doesn't translate to me going into Macy's and buying a place out.
No.
So they make this false connectivity, you know?
Yeah.
And then they take all the masses and make them feel good about going out, and you know what's going to happen? You guys know this. It has happened every year of my waking life. Come March, they're going to come out and beat people up with the numbers about personal indebtedness and all the credit card debt they have.
it's funny that you say that, Viz, because I'm thinking along the same lines there. What they're doing right now is they're trying to get people to spend up their surplus cash, if they have any surplus cash. I use that term very loosely.
There you go. Okay.
But basically, people should be in the mode of the ants right now, where they were saving up, as opposed to the cricket who was just having a good time. And money that could have been stored up, put away for necessities and whatnot, they're getting the people out there on a buying spree saying, you don't have to save. Gas has gone down. Things are looking better.
Exactly.
Things are going to only get better. You don't have to have a surplus of any sort put away. You don't have to have a nest egg. Get out and start buying. Interesting point, going back to when the gas prices started to get high and started to spike. People, Nick Baggett, who's written the book over harp, Angels Don't Play This Harp, he came out with an interesting prediction. He said, "Well, people are not going to have the cash to buy the gas to put in their cars, given the high price of fuel. They won't have ready spending cash, because most Americans get paid on a bi-weekly basis, and they're going to exhaust their flow between now and then, and they're going to have to fill up their car between now and between now and then, and so people are going to run up a tremendous credit card bill, and that's one of the many reasons why the gas prices were raised, to get people to run up humongous credit card bills, so they become in effect indentured servants that basically owe their livelihood to the card companies, many of which are having their the cards were issued to them by the same companies and the same banks that are tied into big oil.
And also, I have to laugh because they're telling everybody the economy is strong. And I remember last month, not that many weeks ago, reading the article, for instance, just one case in particular, of all the auto worker plants that are being closed in the United States and Canada. And I'm saying, hello, what with all the layoffs, and the economy is really good, and unemployment is down. I mean,
what's with GM's massive layoffs here as of late?
Yeah, exactly, up by you and through Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, if things are so great, then why are we cutting back, and why are we cutting back so drastically? Because the GM's layoffs, I
believe it's 12 plants that they intend to close entirely between now and 2008. And the truth is that if the economy is growing, then industry should be growing simultaneously.
Yes, but it's interesting because that Paul should raise the point that industry should be growing simultaneously with economic prosperity. Because evidently it is not. In fact, industry is receding, and we see a kind of an industrial dismantling. The industrial infrastructure of America is being dismantled right before our very eyes. And you were speaking earlier about how people like to use euphemistic terms when speaking about things in the media. One individual, Zbigniew Brzezinski, when he coined the term the techneutronic era, he was actually using that as a euphemism for what has been generally referred to as a post-industrial era. He didn't like the post-industrial era because the sound of that appellation, because it kind of carries with it some negative connotation, because essentially it is a negative thing, because it results in the stripping of industrial infrastructure. But essentially he was referring to the very same thing, and it's interesting because in Brzezinski's technotronic era, and of course I'm going to be paraphrasing him extensively, but he basically cites the rise, the ascendancy of a knowledge elite or an epistemological cartel, and an informational gathering apparatus that's pretty much pervasive throughout society. And isn't that exactly what we have at this very moment? Isn't that exactly what we have with Homeland Security? Isn't that exactly what we have with the Patriot Act? And so essentially, this technotronic era is this post-industrial era. That's what we are seeing tangibly enacted before our very eyes, with the dismantling of America's industrial infrastructure and the economic disparity that's being visited upon the population.
In fact, as I definitely go through my own website, and I did a little what I call book retort. I don't do book reports; I do book retorts.
Mm-hmm.
And on the technotronic era, and it was also called Between Two Ages. He describes that as meaning an age in which technology, and especially electronics, hence my neologism, technotronic, are increasingly becoming the principal determinants of social change, altering the mores, the social structure, the values, and the global outlook of society. And as we know, I mean, Ziggy knows the game plan.
Right.
So, I mean, when he postulates these things, you better believe that they're going to happen, just as we talked about the grand chessboard, and we know as we speak. And I won't put words in your mouth, but do you believe that we're going into Iran?
Into Iran?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, let me share with you what I know about Iran, and I'll let the listening audience, I guess, judge for themselves.
Okay.
There is an individual named Manucher Ghorbanifar who was a major. Well, I don't know if you could call him major, but he was pretty far up there in the scheme. He was an Iran Contra player, and he claimed that there was $150 million worth of enriched uranium that was smuggled from Iraq to Iran 5, probably 6 years going on now ago. And the CIA has even said that Ghorbanifar was a proven fabricator. He flunked 2 lie detector tests that were given to him by the CIA. And the original source of that information was an Iraqi Shiite, and we know that there has been feuding between the Iraqis and the Iranians for quite some time, and so that suggests that the information may be wrong, may be false.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he supplied that information, Ghorbanifar, to the Pentagon due to arrangements made by none other than Michael Ledeen. And Michael Ledeen is, of course, this neoconservative that has written very loving things about Niccolo Machiavelli and just praising the whole Machiavellian tactics for deceiving the population and getting them to go along with what the prince says. Ledeen had introduced Ghorbanifar to Oliver North very early on in the Iran-Contra deal. But, excuse me, 2 Pentagon officials working with the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Douglas Feith, had held meetings with Ghorbanifar, and it included DIA analysts, I believe Larry Franklin, and Harold Rose, who I believe was a Middle East expert that worked with Douglas Feith. And these meetings really put off the Secretary of State at the time. He's no longer Secretary of State, Colin Powell. And he complained to the Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld about it. But Douglas Feith also represents a neoconservative cabal of civilians within the Pentagon. So what I guess I've taken the long way around the barn to say is that we see that the neoconservatives are definitely determined and they're doing their damnedest to see that we do get on an Iranian trajectory and get into and basically move to invade. and we can see through people like Ghorbanifar and through Fox News with its just constant reporting of nothing good about Iran, and Rupert Murdoch is, of course, falling within the neoconservative orbit. We definitely see that is the direction that they want to take us, and that they want to go. Now they have to play nice with the other factions of the elite to get their way, and they might have to do some wheeling in dealing here, and there's lots of other factors, including just how displeased the United States population is with the current state of affairs in Iraq, given how poor things are going over there, and given John Murtha's recent call for getting us out, and how that's actually picked up some momentum. They might have to wait or put it off, but it's definitely something that they would like to see happen, and they'll make moves, subtle moves and whatnot towards that, and work gradually towards that here, and hopefully have it within the time that this administration is still around.
Yeah, if I may add on to that, you were mentioned earlier again little semiotic signposts that go up in the media during many of the speeches of George Bush. He's used the term "fire in the minds of men," and this term is associated with the revolutionary faith, the Promethean faith of radical revolutionaries like the Jacobins of revolutionary France. It's also been a common theme throughout Marxist revolution. It was provided the title for the book by James H. Billington, which I can't recommend enough to folks. But it's interesting that he would use this term because I don't know if Bush is familiar with the connotative meaning behind it, but there's a chance that those who have used Bush as a figurehead for the administration do. The term kind of harkens back to the idea of a perpetual revolution, and given the definite Trotskyist proclivities of the neocons, that's what we're seeing tangibly enacted right now, is a perpetual revolution. Essentially, they are carrying out a strategy that almost mirrors Trotsky's Fourth International.
What I'm going to do is this. First of all, let me get back and do some business. I want to tell folks that you're listening to the poem of Philip D. Collins. They have... let me just cut to the chase. They've done innumerable articles. They can be found in toto on conspiracyarchive.com. Just do a search on that site, and Terry's a really good guy, and he's been good to the Collins brothers, and rightfully so. I mean, they need a venue, and this is an excellent one for them. I think they would agree. So just go to conspiracyarchive.com, do a search if you would on Collins, and you'll come up with a whole page dedicated to the work they've done. The two books to their credit are The Hidden Face of Terrorism and also The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. Those books, you guys will say they're easily accessible on firstbooks.com, barnesandnoble.com, and amazon.com. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I want to go into the series that you've been working on with regard to perpetual wars, but I mean, I'm drawn as you guys are talking and bringing up Brzezinski. Would you allow me? I guess that means you got to, but I'm going to ask you if you would countenance my reading 2 paragraphs to you.
Oh, no, not at all. Sure, go right ahead.
But I want you to respond to both to the one and then to the other, and the reason I bring them up will be very clear. Talking about predictive programming and also a little a nod to the folks about the shape of things to come. This is from Orwell's 1984, okay?
Okay.
In the vast laboratories of the Ministry of Peace, and in the experimental stations hidden in the Brazilian forests, or in the Australian desert, or on the lost islands of the Antarctic, the team of experts are indefatigably at work. Some are concerned simply with planning the logistics of future wars. Others devise larger and larger rocket bombs, more and more powerful explosives, and more impenetrable armor plating. Others search for new and deadlier gases, or for soluble poisons capable of being produced in such quantities as to destroy the vegetation of whole continents, or for breeds of disease germs immunized against all possible antibodies. Others strive to produce a vehicle that shall bore its way under the soil like a submarine underwater, or an aeroplane as independent of its base as a sailing ship. Others explore even remoter possibilities, such as focusing the sun's rays through lenses suspended thousands of kilometers away in space, or producing artificial earthquakes, and tidal waves by tapping the heat at the Earth's center. That's a mouthful, isn't it? And here he writes this in 49. Do you think he was postulating, or do you think he was giving you a glimpse into, indeed, 1984?
To be honest with you, I think it's a bit of both. I think that he knew that. I think that he knew that the power elite would eventually be developing or at least examining such options. Whether or not he could have prognosticated the progress that the elite have made today, I don't know. I mean, I think even HAARP is even far-fetched for Orwell to have accepted in his day. But I think he was definitely prognosticating the various strategies and the various means by which the elite would attempt to bring humanity under their thumb.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, I agree with Philip. I mean, like, he might have not been able to say which one of those would become a reality, but he saw the work going on in those different areas that you were speaking of, whether it be defoliants or bio warfare or new different technologies that make warfare more deadly and more effective. So he knew that at least some of those would become a reality. And I know that with defoliants, we have Fusarium oxyphosphorine, which could be sprayed on whole areas and destroy the crops and whatnot. We've had admissions by different branches of the armed forces concerning weather modification. We have HAARP. I think that it's now pretty much no longer a question that HAARP is a reality and that HAARP is capable of doing some incredible things. So he knew that most of those things were coming down the pike, and most, if not all, would be realized.
Yeah. To give you a better example of what I'm trying to say, for instance, I believe that it was both postulating and prognosticating on the part of, say, H.G. Wells, again, in The Shape of Things to Come, when he brings up what he calls the quote-unquote raid of the germs. Now, he speaks in very broad terms, and he doesn't get too specific. But it's interesting that he should cite this coming time of just mass disease. And now, of course, today we have people who are advocating mass inoculations and vaccinations and what have you. And you have this pandemic avian flu. So again, the crystal ball is a little bit fuzzy, but their predictions are uncannily precise.
He has to speak in generalities, but he knows that as time moves on in Sun and Shade, he'll be able to make it more specific.
Yeah.
And remember, both Orwell and the author of our favorite James Bond series, Ian Fleming, were British intelligence.
Absolutely.
And if people were to go back and read the original Ian Fleming stories and look at the original movies based upon those works, you'd be surprised. I mean, I can tell you guys, and being a little kid in the first row, I watched that stuff and said, "No way!" And of course, here we are. One little twist. I'll have some fun with you, and I'm going to move to the other block of quotes. I'll finish up with what Orwell said in this sense: the scientist of today is either a mixture of psychologist and inquisitor, studying with real ordinary minuteness the meaning of facial expressions, gestures, and tones of voice, and testing the truth-producing effects, get this, of drugs, shock therapy, hypnosis, and physical torture.
And all that's come to pass. He
Yes,
just basically named MK
Yeah.
Ultra long before MK Ultra came into existence.
Absolutely, and I know that he never met William Sims Bainbridge, who's a transhumanist ideologue and head of the National Science Foundation, if I'm not mistaken, or a major player in that program. But William Sims Bainbridge has essentially said the same thing, that through the use of psychotropic drugs, through the use of shock therapy and all sorts of other psychological and neurological manipulation, the human being can be turned into a servile and passive animal. And you also have the same theme of, as Paul mentioned, running through MK Ultra, and Michel Foucault, the deceased Marxist philosopher, basically brought up the fact in his book Discipline and Punish about how the social scientist was gradually supplanting the jury in making the final decision concerning a person's guilt or innocence. Only this time, instead of a straight guilty or innocent verdict, the person is deemed either mentally or mentally stable or unstable, and in so decreeing a person mentally stable or unstable, which of course these assessments are made according to the DSM, which the Diagnostic Statistical Manual adds new mental illnesses to its text all the time, which becomes more and more elastic and encapsulates more and more eccentricities that are pretty much intrinsic to the human condition, thus making you and I both certifiably insane. But with this growing elasticity, more and more people will be qualified as mentally unstable, and thus qualify as people, enemies of the state.
Oh, and we had this discussion a while ago. We were talking with some individuals out in the Midwest who the state decided were not fit to raise their children because they wouldn't have them dosed with Prozac and such. But you're looking at a state like Illinois that wants to do, or actually maybe has done, mandatory mental screening for all students, and apparently to include their parents. So yeah, it's a little strange. One last thing, and then we're going to go on to the Perpetual War series if I can. In light of the role that you just heard me recitate from Orwell, just if you can remember that, and folks, you listen to what Orwell spun off in a very, I think that's one of the greatest paragraphs in literature, by the way. But anyway, consider what Brzezinski said in Between Two Ages, the work to which you just alluded to, and tell me if you don't find a couple of similarities here. His paragraph is, in addition to improved rocketry, multi-missiles, and more powerful and more accurate bombs, future developments may include automated or manned space warships, deep-sea installations, chemical and biological weapons, death rays, and still other forms of warfare. Even the weather may be tampered with. Is that right? These new weapons could either encourage expectations of one-sided, relatively, quote, inexpensive, unquote, victory, permit proxy contests that will be decisive in their strategic political outcome, but will be fought by only a few human beings, or simply create such mutual instability that the breakdown of peace will become inevitable in spite of man's rational recognition of the futility of war. Now there's another mouthful for you, and Brzezinski wrote this, I believe, in 1969 or 71. It was just in that span somewhere.
And once again, look at what we have today. We have HAARP, which basically can do all sorts of crazy things with the weather. And we have different things moving forward in chip technology,
non-lethal weapons, or so-called non-lethal weapons,
right.
Sound weapons that can induce nausea, that can pretty much break up a crowd of dissidents, and essentially, again, the psychotropic drugs, state-sanctioned psychotropic drugs that pretty much can reduce a person to being
Jello.
a passive, servile creature.
And again, I mean, Brzezinski's doing the same thing. I'm not saying he's aping Orwell, but they're both telling you the shape of things to come.
Right.
One from a great distance, and Brzezinski to me is the harbinger of good information for anybody who's listening, and he's the one upon which I base my belief that we are going into Iran because he said we shouldn't in the Grand Chessboard back in '95. Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, please, last comments, and we're going to go to the series.
Sure. It's also interesting, recall that Brzezinski likes to use the term techneutronic era instead of post-industrial era, and because he recognizes the negative connotations that are rightfully connected with the term post-industrial.
Sure, when you say post, it's over. Right.
Exactly. But there was a report. There was a report in May of 1974 put together by Willis Harman and the Stanford Research Institute director, Willis Harman, and it was entitled "The Changing Images of Man." And in this report, it called for the image for the discarding of quote the image of industrial and technological man, unquote. That's pure post-industrialism. That's the reduction of humanity to this neo-tribal state. And this again was a report that was assembled by the Stanford Research Institute director. This in effect is not even fiction. This was an actual report that was projecting options for the sociological resculpting of society itself.
No doubt about it. And on that, and I tell you what, I don't mind if we, like I said, we bleed over into the next hour. I'm not segmenting, just one topic to one show, because I want to get into, and we've actually touched upon it, and that's the Perpetual War series. Can you tell us what that's about, where it is, and where it's going?
Sure. Well, essentially, okay, we all know that war is a racket. We all know that war provides enormous profits for what's been called the military-industrial complex. But also, war serves what I call an alchemical function for the power elite. The power elite essentially adhere to an evolutionary worldview. This evolutionary worldview dates back 6,000 years to Mesopotamia, and it's appeared throughout history under various appellations. It was Nietzsche's Übermensch. It was Hegel's Weltgeist. But it's a doctrine of transformism that's now been disseminated on the popular level as Darwinism. Darwin developed his theory of evolution based on his grandfather's earlier theories of evolution in a book called Zoonomia, and of course his grandfather was a Freemason, and the Freemasonic British Royal Society was responsible for promulgating Darwin's theory. But essential to Darwin's theory is the belief in natural selection and a struggle for the survival of the fittest. And in the book, if I'm not mistaken, it's Evolution and Ethics by Darwinian Sir Arthur Keith. And if I may, I'll read just this little chunk quote from his book. Keith states, and I'm quoting now, "If war be the progeny of evolution, and I am convinced that it is, then evolution has gone mad, reaching such a height of ferocity as must frustrate its proper role in the world of life, which is the advancement of her competing units, these being tribes, nations, or races of mankind. There is no way of getting rid of war save one, and that is to rid human nature of the sanctions imposed on it by the law of evolution. Can man render the law of evolution null and void? I have discovered no way that this is at once possible and practicable," unquote. See, now, in characterizing war as the progeny of evolution, Sir Arthur Keith made it clear that conflict is the natural corollary of man's purported Darwinian ascent. Darwinism rests heavily upon the concept of natural selection, which depicts life as an enormous struggle for survival. And on the microcosmic level, this struggle is bodied forth by competition between species. But on the macrocosmic level, this struggle manifests itself as war between nations. Now, the more war, the more conflict there is, there's according to evolutionary theory, the more corresponding development, biological development, mental development of the human species there is. And this is why war is looked upon by the power elite as a tool, an instrument of alchemy. It's used to alchemically essentially alchemically resculpt man and transform man. They believe, according to their evolutionary worldview, they believe that it's propelling man further and further towards the final evolutionary pinnacle, which is apotheosis.
And evolutionists also believe in something known as punctuated equilibrium, which is basically a period or a point when evolution takes a quantum leap forward. It just makes a massive jump, and they use this belief to explain away the different breaks in the fossil record, to explain why there are no missing links. But the same thing happens on the the same principle can be applied on the socio-political stage, and so if you have a massive global war, then what you are doing is bringing about punctuated equilibrium and making human evolution take a tremendous jump forward.
Yeah. Now, in his book, Keys of This Blood, Malachi Martin assesses the power elite as, and I believe he's using the Pope's words now, but as quote-unquote socio-political Darwinians. So when the elite are carrying out this agenda for perpetual war, there is an underlying Darwinian theme to it. To be sure, the military-industrial complex reaps enormous profits from these dialectical skirmishes between nations, and it's in their interest to keep the wars going because it keeps the money coming in. But underpinning that is this religious belief. That again is premised on older occult doctrines dating back 6,000 years to Mesopotamia, to Mystery Babylon. That man is progressing gradually towards apotheosis, to becoming God, and war is a facilitative agent in that ongoing developmental process towards becoming God.
I tell you what, at this point, I'd like to break, if we could.
Sure.
We're going to pick up on the same note on the other side of the second hour. We are with Philip and Paul Collins. That was hour one on this December 30th, which will be December 30th, but it's okay. And we're going to come back for a second hour to pick up on this notion of perpetual war and what the gentlemen are talking about. And also, for the first time, I want to talk to them about their views about 9/11. So, folks, stay with us. And, guys, we got a chance to order the horses, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.